The 1970s were a strange and daring decade for Saturday morning TV. While kids devoured the familiar antics of Hanna-Barbera, Filmation pushed into bold, bizarre, and often short-lived experiments. Some worked, many failed, and most slipped through the cracks of memory. What if the shows you barely recall held untold stories? Let's rediscover 25 forgotten Filmation cartoons. The Hardy Boys, 1970. When the Hardy Boys came to life under Filmation, it seemed destined for success. The novels had been staples of American childhood for decades, and television was eager for wholesome, adventurous teen detectives. Yet instead of a pure mystery cartoon, Filmation chose an odd hybrid. Part animated adventure, part live-action band segments where the boys sang bubblegum pop songs. Executives hoped lightning would strike twice, following the path of the Monkees and the Archies. Instead, it confused audiences. The mysteries lacked the suspense of the books, and the music felt forced rather than organic. The animation was stiff, the humor fell flat, and fans of the novels balked at this sugary reinvention. Despite CBS's hopes, ratings sagged, and the show disappeared after one season. Behind the scenes, even Filmation staff admitted the blend of formats never gelled. Today, collectors scour for episodes, fascinated by this experiment that straddled two genres but mastered neither. It's a reminder that chasing pop trends can bury even the most trusted names in storytelling. The Hardy Boys deserved gripping mystery. Instead, they got bubblegum songs that time forgot. Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, 1972. On the surface, Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids was a triumph. Running for over a decade, it became Filmation's longest-lived series, praised for its blend of comedy, music, and life lessons. Each episode carried a moral, often tackling issues like bullying, prejudice, or even substance abuse, subjects many networks were afraid to address. For many children of the 1970s, Fat Albert and his junkyard gang were comforting figures of humor and heart. But decades later, the show became a ghost of itself. Syndication slowed, and episodes grew scarce, not because of their content, but because of the controversies surrounding Bill Cosby. His later fall from grace cast a long shadow over the once-celebrated cartoon, leaving it trapped in cultural limbo. Collectors and historians now view it with conflicted eyes. It was groundbreaking for its positive black representation on television, yet impossible to separate from its creator. Filmation's effort was brave, timely, and educational, but history has buried it beneath scandal. Fat Albert stands as both a pioneer and a cautionary tale, proof that even trailblazing art can be eclipsed by the darkness of those behind it. Lassie's Rescue Rangers, 1973. When Filmation was entrusted with the legacy of Lassie, expectations were high. The collie was one of America's most beloved screen icons, known for loyalty, courage, and heartfelt storytelling. But instead of preserving those values, Filmation reimagined Lassie as the leader of a futuristic rescue squad. The dog, alongside human companions and gadgets, operated from a base like something out of a superhero cartoon. Audiences recoiled. Longtime Lassie fans dismissed it as sacrilege, saying the noble collie had been cheapened into a gimmick. Critics mocked the stiff animation and awkward plots, which bore little resemblance to the warmth of the live-action series. Even children, the intended audience, found it hollow compared to the real Lassie adventures still playing in syndication. Behind the curtain, CBS executives had insisted Lassie needed to be modernized to keep pace with the flashy, action-driven cartoons of the era. But the gamble backfired, and Lassie's Rescue Rangers was quickly canceled. It remains an odd blemish on both Filmation's record and Lassie's legacy. Forgotten by most, it survives only as a cautionary tale of how not to update a classic. My Favorite Martians, 1973. Filmation's My Favorite Martians was an animated continuation of the 1960s sitcom My Favorite Martian. On paper, it had potential. Audiences loved quirky aliens, and nostalgia was a safe bet. Original star Jonathan Harris even returned to lend his voice. Yet by 1973, the humor of the original felt outdated. The series relied heavily on slapstick gags, repetitive alien gadget jokes, and tired sitcom tropes. Animation did little to rejuvenate the concept. Critics pointed out the recycled plots and lack of originality, while viewers tuned out in favor of fresher, more imaginative series. Even Filmation staff privately admitted the show was a rehash, designed more to fill schedules than inspire wonder. It limped along briefly before fading from the lineup, with little fanfare and almost no syndication afterward. Today, it exists as a curiosity for die-hard collectors who marvel that anyone thought the sitcom needed a cartoon follow-up. For most audiences, it's vanished completely, a footnote in the long list of Filmation experiments. Once a symbol of 1960s sci-fi humor, it became proof that nostalgia alone cannot sustain a series when creativity runs thin. Star Trek, the animated series, 1973. When Star Trek, the animated series, premiered, it was hailed as a bold experiment. Filmation resurrected the canceled 1960s sci-fi classic, bringing back much of the original cast, including William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley, to voice their animated counterparts. Fans rejoiced, but critics were skeptical. Could Saturday morning animation handle the weight of Starfleet exploration? In truth, the series was a mixed success. It offered ambitious storytelling, reintroducing beloved characters and continuing arcs abandoned by the live-action show. Writers even expanded on science fiction concepts too expensive for the original budget, such as alien landscapes and bizarre species. However, the stiff Filmation animation, budget shortcuts, and frequent recycling of shots undermined its grandeur. Children found it slow, while adults treated it as second-tier Trek. Behind the scenes, Gene Roddenberry was supportive, but not deeply involved, leaving writers more freedom. The show even won a Daytime Emmy, making it the franchise's first major award. Yet, despite this achievement, it was quietly dropped after 2 seasons and largely forgotten in syndication. The Brady Kids, 1972. After the Brady Bunch became a sitcom sensation, Filmation seized the chance to spin the wholesome family into animation. The Brady Kids featured the 6 siblings, voiced by their original actors, teamed with magical animals, a talking bird, and surreal adventures that made little sense. CBS executives believed the combination of family charm and fantasy would capture young viewers. But what began as a clever cross-promotion turned into something unintentionally comical. Audiences expecting slice-of-life Brady drama were instead treated to plots involving aliens, time travel, and mystical gadgets. Critics were unimpressed, labeling it a shallow imitation of the Archies. The show also leaned heavily on canned laugh tracks and repetitive storylines, leaving even Brady fans bewildered. Behind the curtain, Filmation was under immense pressure to churn out content quickly, resulting in shortcuts in animation and writing. Ratings sagged after the initial curiosity wore off, and the show disappeared after 1 season. Its legacy? A quirky footnote in Brady history, rarely rerun and largely forgotten. Today, the Brady Kids is remembered mostly by nostalgia buffs who marvel at how far Filmation was willing to stretch the family's brand. It reminds us that not all spin-offs retain the heart of their source. Shazam, 1974. In the mid-1970s, superheroes dominated comic books, and Filmation hoped to ride the wave. Shazam brought the DC Comics character Captain Marvel, later renamed Shazam, to television, mixing live action with occasional animation. For children, the concept was irresistible. A boy named Billy Batson transformed into a mighty hero with a single word. The show became popular with young viewers eager for superhero thrills, but critics noted its limitations. The special effects were crude even by 1970s standards, and plots leaned heavily on moral lessons rather than action. Episodes typically ended with Captain Marvel explaining a takeaway message, making it feel more like an educational program than a superhero epic. Behind the scenes, Filmation struggled with budget constraints, forcing scripts to rely on repetition and recycled footage. Yet, despite these flaws, Shazam lasted 3 seasons, longer than many Filmation experiments. Still, it was eventually overshadowed by more polished superhero adaptations and faded from public memory. Today, Shazam is remembered mainly as an odd precursor to modern superhero television. It lacked spectacle, but its earnest storytelling gave it heart. Forgotten by most, it survives as a nostalgic relic of a time when superheroes were more about lessons than explosions. Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, 1976. Filmation's Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, was unlike most Saturday morning fare of the era. Where other studios relied on slapstick and recycled gags, this series leaned heavily on Edgar Rice Burroughs' novels, bringing a more faithful adaptation of the iconic jungle hero. Tarzan spoke in complete sentences, battled strange tribes, and explored lost civilizations. To many parents, it felt almost literary compared to the cartoons surrounding it. But despite its ambition, Tarzan never achieved mainstream fame. The show was constrained by Filmation's limited animation style, awkward movements, repeated shots, and static backgrounds. What could have been epic often felt stiff. Still, it had a loyal fan base, especially among kids who wanted adventure with a touch of seriousness. Behind the scenes, Filmation's team researched Burroughs' novels, trying to honor the source material. For once, a Saturday morning hero wasn't watered down. Yet Tarzan was out of step with a generation leaning toward superheroes and comedy. After its run, it faded into syndication obscurity, rarely rebroadcast. Today, it's remembered as one of Filmation's nobler efforts, flawed but respectful. Forgotten by many, it stands as a reminder that even Saturday morning could reach for sophistication. Tarzan roared in animation, but few were listening. The New Adventures of Batman, 1977. In the wake of Super Friends, Filmation returned Batman to Saturday mornings with The New Adventures of Batman. This time, Adam West and Burt Ward reprised their roles as Batman and Robin, lending nostalgic charm. It should have been a hit, the caped crusader voiced by his most famous actors. Yet the execution faltered. Filmation's limited animation undercut Batman's dynamic world. Fight scenes looked clumsy, villains were often played for laughs, and the addition of the impish character Batmite divided fans. Some found him comic relief, others felt he cheapened the show's tone. Critics argued that it diluted Batman's dark mystique, turning him into a campy figure at a time when the character was evolving in comics toward a grimmer identity. Behind the scenes, Filmation clashed with Hanna-Barbera over rights, leading to competing versions of Batman airing simultaneously. Confusion and fatigue set in, and the Filmation version quietly ended after 1 season. Today, the series is remembered mainly for West and Ward's participation and Batmite's odd presence. It's a forgotten corner of Batman's animated history, overshadowed by stronger adaptations to come. A reminder that even icons can stumble when presented with weak animation and misguided tone. Sour Tea, The Fabulous Funnies, 1978. At the height of syndication experiments, Filmation tried something unusual, adapting classic newspaper comic strips into animation. The Fabulous Funnies brought together beloved characters like Alley Oop, Nancy, and Broomhilda into one anthology series. The goal was to revive old comics for new audiences, tapping into nostalgia while entertaining kids. Unfortunately, the concept failed. Critics complained the humor felt dated, and younger audiences didn't connect with characters their parents had grown up reading. The animation did little to elevate the material, relying on Filmation's typical shortcuts. Instead of breathing life into these comic icons, the show felt more like a museum exhibit. Behind the scenes, Filmation believed it was creating a unique bridge between generations. But ratings never materialized, and the series disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Few episodes were rerun, and the show slipped into near-total obscurity. Today, the Fabulous Funnies is remembered mostly by animation historians as one of Filmation's boldest but weakest experiments. It's a testament to how nostalgia alone can't carry a series without strong writing. Forgotten by most, it remains an odd footnote in the history of Saturday morning television. Sport Billy, 1979. At the close of the decade, Filmation attempted to capture the global craze for sports with Sport Billy. The series followed a boy from the planet Olympus, sent to Earth with a magic sports bag that could produce any piece of athletic equipment. With his friends Lily and Willie, Billy battled villains who wanted to ban sports and spread unfair play. When it debuted, the show had international appeal, especially in Europe, where soccer-loving audiences embraced the idea. But in the United States, it barely made a ripple. Critics found its plots repetitive, with every episode boiling down to the same formula. Villain interferes, Billy whips out magical gear, lesson on fairness delivered. Children quickly lost interest. Behind the scenes, Filmation had hoped Sport Billy would become a merchandising juggernaut, selling toys, lunchboxes, and jerseys. While it gained traction overseas, the U.S. market was uninterested. By the early 1980s, it had disappeared entirely from American syndication. Today, Sport Billy is almost forgotten in the U.S., though it lingers in nostalgic memory abroad, especially in Europe and South America. It stands as proof that even Filmation tried to globalize children's cartoons before it was common. Forgotten stateside, it survives as a quirky reminder of sportsmanship packaged in Saturday morning fantasy. Groovy Ghoulies, 1970 to 1971, reruns into the 70s. Though it first aired in 1970, Groovy Ghoulies was kept alive through endless reruns well into the decade. This kooky monster comedy featured a band of cartoonish ghouls, Drac, Frankie, and Wolfie, who played music and cracked puns inside Horrible Hall. Filmation intended it as a horror-themed answer to the Archies. Initially, children loved the silly slapstick and toe-tapping songs. But as years passed, critics grew harsher. The jokes were repetitive, the animation crude, and the music felt like second-rate bubblegum pop. By the mid-70s, the show's charm had faded, and younger audiences had moved on to fresher cartoons. Behind the scenes, Filmation leaned heavily on Groovy Ghoulies to pad Saturday morning schedules, recycling segments into crossover appearances with Sabrina the Teenage Witch and even the Archies. This overexposure may have hastened its decline. Today, Groovy Ghoulies is remembered fondly by some for its monster mashup fun, but largely dismissed as a dated relic. Its legacy rests mostly with collectors of 1970s animation who view it as both campy and charming. Forgotten by the mainstream, it remains a Halloween curiosity, a goofy experiment in mixing monsters, music, and mayhem. The New Adventures of Flash Gordon, 1979. When Filmation tackled Flash Gordon, it aimed for something grander than Saturday morning fluff. Inspired by Alex Raymond's legendary comic strip, the studio poured resources into a serialized adventure that was more sophisticated than most children's shows. The result was The New Adventures of Flash Gordon, an ambitious attempt to recapture pulp science fiction for a new generation. At first, critics were impressed. The serialized format was unusual for Saturday mornings, with stories continuing across episodes. The show respected the original material, presenting Flash, Dale Arden, and Ming the Merciless in a faithful, dramatic style. But Filmation's budgetary limitations quickly showed. Recycled animation, static backgrounds, and stiff character movement undermined the epic tone. Audiences used to faster-paced cartoons lost patience. Ratings lagged, and the show never reached the popularity of its comic strip source or later adaptations. Behind the scenes, Filmation staff felt frustrated that their most ambitious project couldn't live up to its vision. Today, it's remembered by animation enthusiasts as one of Filmation's noblest failures, a show that aimed for high adventure but collapsed under budget and format constraints. Forgotten by most, it still shines as a glimpse of what Saturday mornings could have been. The Space Sentinels, 1977, Filmation sought to create original superheroes with the Space Sentinels. The show introduced three young heroes, Hercules, Mercury, and Astrea, chosen to protect Earth from cosmic threats. With powers of super strength, speed, and shapeshifting, they operated from a high-tech space station. On paper, it looked like Filmation's answer to Super Friends. While children initially tuned in, critics pointed out its lack of originality. The characters leaned heavily on archetypes, and the animation was plagued by Filmation's usual shortcuts. The educational overtones, emphasizing teamwork and responsibility, often overshadowed genuine thrills. Behind the scenes, the studio believed the diverse cast would resonate. Astrea, a black female hero, was rare for the era. While progressive, the stories didn't rise to the level of the concept. After just one season, the Sentinels were folded into Tarzan and the Super 7, then forgotten entirely. Today, the Space Sentinels survives only in the memories of devoted fans who admired its attempt at inclusivity. It's a reminder of Filmation's boldness, ambitious ideas held back by budget and execution. Forgotten by the masses, it flickers on as a noble but flawed step in superhero history. Freedom Force, 1978. Another segment buried within Tarzan and the Super 7 was Freedom Force, a team of mythic heroes including Hercules, Isis, Merlin, Super Samurai, and Sinbad. Together they fought evil across time and space. Filmation imagined it as a mythological superhero league, blending history, fantasy, and morality tales. While imaginative, the execution fell flat. Episodes were short, rarely fleshing out the characters beyond their archetypes. Animation was simplistic, and villains were quickly dispatched, robbing the stories of tension. Critics dismissed it as Super Friends Light, while children struggled to connect with heroes they barely knew. Behind the scenes, Filmation hoped to expand Freedom Force into its own series, but it never gained traction. Network executives considered it too niche, and it was quickly dropped after a handful of episodes. Today, it's remembered only by completists of Filmation history, who see in it the bones of a show that could have thrived with more attention. Forgotten by nearly everyone else, Freedom Force shows how even bold concepts can vanish without strong writing to sustain them. The New Adventures of Gilligan, 1974. Capitalizing on the enduring popularity of Gilligan's Island, Filmation brought the castaways into animation with The New Adventures of Gilligan. Voiced by most of the original actors, the show recreated familiar island antics. Gilligan bungles a rescue attempt, the skipper shouts, and escape remains just out of reach. At first, nostalgia carried it. Children enjoyed the slapstick, and fans of the original tuned in for curiosity. But the humor quickly grew stale. Without the physical comedy of the live-action series, the animated version felt flat. Critics dismissed it as redundant, noting that it added nothing new to the franchise. Behind the curtain, Filmation used the cheapest animation techniques possible, recycling shots until episodes felt interchangeable. Even the original cast grew weary of the material. After 2 seasons, the show vanished from CBS's schedule. Today, it's remembered as a pale echo of a beloved sitcom. an experiment that proved not all shows translate to animation. Forgotten by most, it serves as an example of Filmation's tendency to overreach with adaptations. Gilligan may have remained stranded, but this time audiences left the island behind. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll, 1979. By the late 1970s, Filmation turned to reviving classic cartoon stars. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll sought to modernize Terrytoons icons for a new generation. Mighty Mouse was reimagined as a heroic figure teaching lessons, while the mischievous magpies caused slapstick chaos. But nostalgia wasn't enough. Critics argued that Filmation's limited animation stripped the characters of their original energy. The show's pacing was slow, the gags repetitive, and the morals heavy-handed. Audiences who loved the classic shorts found this version lifeless. Children gravitated toward fresher cartoons, leaving the revival stranded. Behind the scenes, Filmation had hoped to reintroduce these icons into syndication with merchandising opportunities. But the magic was gone. The revival lasted briefly, then disappeared from schedules with little fanfare. Today, it's a footnote in the history of both Mighty Mouse and Filmation. Forgotten by the mainstream, it underscores a truth about animation. Lightning rarely strikes twice when nostalgia alone drives the creative engine. Mighty Mouse may have come to save the day, but in this version, he arrived too late. Filmation's cartoons of the 1970s were daring, flawed, and unforgettable in their ambition. They remind us of a time when Saturday mornings promised anything. From superheroes to ghost hunters, from Jungle Kings to forgotten spin-offs. Which of these lost gems do you remember? Like, subscribe, and share your own forgotten favorites.